So let's get right into it. Firstly, today is the third day of the month of Elul. In a moment, I think I left my shofar over there, but I will blow a shofar in just a moment. Is there a shofar on the right behind you? There? Yeah. Is there a small one? No, on the right. Over there. There it is. Yeah. The one. Okay. Yeah. Can you pass it to me? Yeah. Thank you. Sorry about that. So we're going to blow shofar in just a moment, and let me first though share the parsha. This week's parsha is called Ki Teitze. We're about halfway through Deuteronomy. We have just a couple weeks left until Simchat Torah. We have about four more Shabbats. We have a double coming up. 4 more Shabbats with Torah reading. Rosh Hashanah this year itself is going to be on Shabbat. Sukkot is going to be on Shabbat. Shmini Atzeret is going to be on Shabbat. So we're going to miss a couple. So we only have about 4 left. This week's parsha has lots and lots of commandments, like last week's parsha, except it has even more. As I mentioned, the last previous two parshas, as well as this one, are all Moshe kind of reviews many of the commandments. First, he begins with the commandment of someone who finds a woman on the battlefield and wants to marry her must first have a cooling off period before marrying her. Of course, that is only if the Rambam adds, only if she converts. The Torah that tells us about the firstborn getting a double portion in the inheritance. We did a class a little while back about the laws of Jewish inheritance. The Torah that tells us about a rebellious son. Excuse me, who does not listen to his parents and must be punished for his rebellion, because, as our sages say, he will end up getting much worse. And the Torah essentially says we should stop him before it gets worse. And the Torah tells us about not leaving the dead overnight. You have to bury people on that same day. If you see someone's lost animal, you must return it to the person and find the person that it belongs to, and same is also for any other object. If you see an animal that has fallen down, you must help it up. The Torah bans cross-dressing. The Torah then tells us the mitzvah of shooing away the mother bird if you want to take either the chicks or the if a mother bird is sitting on her chicks or eggs, you're not allowed to take the mother, but you can shoo her away and take the eggs or the chicks. We once did a class where we focused on this very unique mitzvah of Shiluach HaKan. The Torah then tells us that if you have a flat roof, you must have a fence around, and you use the roof, you must have a fence around it. And this is really a law of all danger. There must be precautions against danger. We're told against crossbreeding plants, not to plow, excuse me, with two different animals at the same time, not to wear clothing that have a mix of wool and linen. We once did a class of that as well. The mitzvah of Jewish men wearing tzitzit on a four-cornered garment. Then the Torah goes through if a man falsely accuses his wife of committing adultery, and goes through if a woman was raped, there's certain penalties. And then I'm not going through all of them. I'm jumping around a little bit. The Torah bans a mamzer, someone who is a child of a forbidden marriage, from marrying another Jew, bans the nations of Ammon and Moab from marrying into the Jewish people. The Torah that tells us that when we are fighting at war, we must have a shovel, a way to, when we relieve ourselves, to pickaxe to dig and make sure we cover whatever our feces, and that's really a mitzvah of general hygiene. We once did a class on Jewish laws of hygiene. We're then warned against lending on interest, when you vow a sacrifice, to bring it within a reasonable amount of time, which is usually 3 festivals. When you have a worker working with food, they're allowed to eat the food. We're then given the laws of divorce of marriage and divorce, which we're going to soon focus on, and the prohibition of someone who was divorced and then their wife remarried, and then her second husband either died or she divorced again to go back to her first husband. She's forbidden from going back to her first husband. Then in the first year, one is not supposed to leave their spouse, but remain together with their spouse for the first year. And not to take a pledge when lending a poor person, not to take something that they need to survive as a pledge. The death penalty for kidnapping. The Torah warns us to pay our workers on time, on the day that we owe them the money. That children should not be punished for the sins of their parents. Parents should not be punished for the sins of their children. To leave, if you forget a sheaf in the field, a bundle of wheat, leave it for the poor. Then we're told if someone sins, that the punishment for many transgressions of the Torah is going to be lashes, and that is 39 lashes that we give them. The Torah tells the law of the levirate marriage. If a woman's husband dies without any children, she should marry the brother. If they do not want to marry, they have an option of performing a ceremony called chalitza. We previously did a class where we spoke about this, the laws of chalitza. And then the Torah bans us from having incorrect weights. And then the Torah warns us to remember what Amalek did to us, how they attacked us on the way out of Egypt. So those are a handful of the many, many, many commandments mentioned in this week's Parsha. You have now a couple of them that I've just shared with you. And so that's the Parsha in short. Let me open it. Any questions on the Parsha? On the many commandments I mentioned? Okay, we'll have other Parsha class we'll be able to talk about it. So let me blow the shofar. Next week I hope to do a class on the blowing of the shofar. So we'll talk about it more in detail. So if you want, you can rise. Let's rise. Thank you. Okay. So now, because divorce is mentioned in this week's Parsha, it's a subject I did not want to address, but I think it is really, really important to address just to understand the Jewish laws of it. It's a fascinating ceremony, one of the more complicated ceremonies in Judaism, and I think it's really important that at least, even if you should never, ever need it, but firstly, if you do need it, you should know what to do and what it involves. And even if you don't need it, I think it's still important to know because everyone knows someone who will at some point in their lives need a Jewish divorce. Judaism believes very strongly in marriage and the value of a stable family. We've spoken about before, we've done a class before about the Jewish family value and the sanctity of marriage. But the Torah recognizes that sometimes marriages don't work for a variety of reasons, and they need to be dissolved. The Torah gives us a fairly complex ceremony of how to dissolve a marriage that we call in Hebrew get. Now, of course, we only dissolve a marriage at last resort, and we try to do whatever we can to make the marriage work. But when it does come to an end and the people need to go separate ways, hopefully they could move on and maybe even find a better partner. We do have to do a divorce. We do allow them to get divorced. And so when a Jewish couple gets divorced, it's not enough for them to do a legal divorce. They need to do this Jewish divorce, this Jewish ceremony called a get. A Jewish couple that gets divorced civilly without having a get, without doing a Jewish divorce, and according to Jewish law, they are still married. They are still husband and wife. And therefore, they would be forbidden under Jewish law to marry anyone else. And if they do, in violation of the law, they would be living in sin because they're still married to someone else. If a woman remarries without obtaining a Jewish divorce from her previous Jewish husband, her children will be mamzerim, and they would be forbidden from marrying another Jew. So it's really, really important then that Jewish couples that get divorced not only do the civil divorce, but make sure they get the Jewish divorce. Furthermore, we believe that when couples get married, they are soulmates. In other words, they are two halves of a soul and their soul merges. And so their souls are connected when a couple is married. If someone was married and did not obtain a Jewish divorce, according to Jewish law, they are still married. And that means that their souls, because souls don't recognize civil law, their souls are still connected. So you are still connected to your ex until you get the Jewish divorce, until you do the get. So who needs a get? So any two Jews that lived together as married must get a Jewish divorce. Even if they were married through a non-halachic wedding, so they didn't do their marriage in line with halacha, say they got a reform or conservative marriage, or even if they were married only through a civil wedding, or even if they were never technically married, but living together as husband and wife, in other words, appearing to people as husband and wife, they need to get a Jewish divorce. They need a halachic divorce. Now, in event that one of the parties remarries without a Jewish divorce, or in event that one of the parties refused to participate in the Jewish divorce, if there was never a halachic wedding, there can be leniencies that allow us to absolve the need for a Jewish divorce. However, these leniencies generally require special dispensation from a leading halachic expert. They're very hard to obtain, and they're only given when there's absolutely no other option. The ideal is that any Jewish couple where both of the spouses are Jewish should obtain a Jewish divorce, even if they did not have a halachic marriage, even if they didn't have a Jewish marriage, they should obtain a Jewish divorce. However, if one of the spouses is not Jewish halachically, then there is no need for a Jewish divorce. And this is true even if one of the spouses converted to Judaism, but that conversion was invalid according to halacha, then they do not require a Jewish divorce. If one of the spouses converted with what we call a questionable conversion, an example would be that they did it in front of an observant Beth Din, but they never really committed to following the commandments, and their commitment was not at the time sincere. Well, that is a little more complicated, but we still require a Jewish divorce. So if there's even a questionable Jewish conversion, halachic conversion, we require a Jewish divorce. If there was no halachic conversion, there is no requirement for Jewish divorce at all. However, if they're both Jewish, even if there was no Jewish marriage, but they consider themselves married, they still require a divorce.
So the conversion was done conservative, not orthodox.
If the conversion was in violation of halacha, it doesn't matter the title. If it was in violation of halacha, if it was not done in the constraints of halacha, then it is not valid, and you do not need a Jewish divorce. Yes, Hillary.
Okay, so you said even if they didn't get married in the Jewish law, but they live together. Right?
Yes.
They're not married.
Yes.
They have to get a divorce.
If a couple lives together just as friends, without actually going as a married couple, going around as a married couple, they do not need a Jewish divorce.
What do you mean going around?
If they have, I think there's a legal term today, where they have a civil union where essentially they've been living together for years and they introduce each other as a married couple. They say, "This is my wife."
It's 10
Then,
years, I think. By law, I think it's 10
so
years.
if you would generally in society be considered married, you need a get. If you just say, "This is my boyfriend," you do not need a Jewish divorce. Okay.
No, it's
And if you're unsure, then I'd be happy to deal with direct, specific questions that you may have.
It's true that if the man should remarry without getting a get.
The man cannot remarry without getting a get.
Someone told me.
No, that is not correct. Okay,
Okay.
but we're not going to focus on what happens if you can't get one. We're going to focus just on the laws of the divorce itself. So because of the complexity of Jewish divorce, and it is, as we'll see, quite a complicated procedure, most rabbis, including me, are not qualified to perform divorces. So everything I'm going to be sharing here with you is general knowledge about Jewish divorces. I'm giving you some general information, but for detailed questions, you really need to consult with an expert in divorce. I'd be happy to connect you to one or consult for you, but I myself am not I'm not certified to perform divorces, although I have done a little training and witnessed many divorces, but I'm not certified to perform divorces, and so what I'm sharing with you is not as an expert. A divorce must be performed by a Beth Din, which is a Jewish court of 3 rabbis, of which at least one must be an expert in Jewish divorce, Yadin, have be certified to perform Jewish divorce. We previously did classes on the Beth Din and what the role of the Beth Din is. Now, to get a divorce, one needs to go to a Beth Din. Generally, if there's a local Beth Din, you go to a local Beth Din. If there's no local Beth Din, you need to travel to a place where there is a Beth Din. Here in Los Angeles, there are multiple Beth Dins that will help you perform divorces. Now, you have to make sure that the Beth Din is a competent Beth Din that performs divorces according to halacha, according to Jewish law. Because a so-called Beth Din that does not follow halacha, if they're not following the laws, and as you're going to see, it's quite complex, if they do not do the divorce correctly, then their actions are meaningless and the couple are still married, they are not divorced. So you must go to a Beth Din that knows what they're doing and is going to follow the halacha properly.
Can you spell that word, Beth Din?
Beth Din, in Hebrew, Bet Din, or Bet Din. Bethdin. Beth Din, 2 words.
So there's actually
It's a Jewish court. Yes, we have Jewish courts here in Los Angeles. Yes.
Jewish court of 3 rabbis.
A Jewish court of rabbis. Yes.
Which
Yes.
do they do first? The legal divorce or the...
Excellent. All right, let's get that right now. So ideally, all disputes between 2 Jews, when Jews have any disputes, you should not go to court. You should never sue your fellow Jew. And we spoke about this when we did our class on the Beth Din. You should never sue a fellow Jew in court. You should only adjudicate all issues with another Jew in a Jewish court, in a Beth Din, in accordance with Jewish law. So ideally, when a couple gets divorced, there's a lot to settle. There's financial things to settle. There's alimony and child support and custody issues to settle. Ideally, all those things should be settled in the Beth Din. Generally, you'd go to the Beth Din, you'd have multiple meetings where they would go through the various things that need to be settled. They would settle everything. Usually you have to first file in a court of law so that they recognize the divorce and they recognize the settlement. You file that you're going to binding arbitration to the Beth Din, and then the Beth Din gives you the full settlement. And then at the end of the agreements and the settlement, then you at the end of the agreements and the settlement, then you do the get, then you do the divorce, the actual ceremony that we're going to describe. Unfortunately, however, and then that's usually then you go back to the courts, to the civil courts, and you get that settlement approved by the courts. Unfortunately, however, most Jews that have disputes in this country do not go to the Beth Din. They choose not to, in violation of the law, and tend to go to the courts. And that means that most couples that get divorced choose not to have their settlement adjudicated as required in the Beth Din, but choose to have their settlement adjudicated in civil court. Now, if you do that, if you're going to have your settlement adjudicated in civil court, which is in violation of halacha, but let's say you do that, you still need to have the get. You still need to get the Jewish divorce. And my recommendation, not just my recommendation, but the recommendation is that don't wait until the case settles. Once you finalize your divorce, getting your ex to go back to the Beth Din to do a Jewish divorce is going to be very, very difficult. Go straight away.